Vextel stared at the glowing screen in front of him with tired eyes. The young Zephyrion had been working for 16 straight hours in the massive data processing center that orbited the bright star at the center of the Andromeda core. His job was simple but boring. Update the records for thousands of planets across the galaxy. Most of the time he just changed numbers or moved files from one folder to another. The Galactic Council employed millions of beings like Vextel to keep track of every world in their territory. They watched planets where primitive species live, planets with advanced civilizations, and empty worlds that might be useful someday. It was important work, but nobody really paid attention to the details. The system was so big that small mistakes happened all the time. Vextel picked up his next assignment and read the file name, Sol3, also called Earth by the locals. The file said it was home to a species called humans who had just learned to make simple rockets. They were nowhere near ready to join galactic society. The Council had been watching them for about 50 of their years, but kept their distance. Humans were still fighting wars with each other and had barely left their own planet. The update was routine. Earth's status needed to change from early observation to continued monitoring because the humans had recently landed some machines on their nearby moon. Vextel found the right category in the computer system and clicked on it. But he was so tired that his finger slipped. Instead of clicking Continued Monitoring, he accidentally clicked Sentient Species Ready for Integration. The computer accepted the change immediately. Within seconds, automated systems across the galaxy began processing Earth's new status. The Council's ancient computers had been running the same programs for thousands of years. When a planet got marked as ready for integration, the machines automatically started the welcome process. They sent out official documents, universal translators, and formal invitations without any human checking the decision. 3 hours later, a powerful transmission beam shot across space toward the small blue planet in the outer arm of the galaxy. The message contained enough energy to travel faster than light and reach Earth in minutes instead of years. It carried mathematical formulas, star charts, and a formal invitation written in over 300 galactic languages. Dr. Kate Morrison was drinking her 4th cup of coffee that morning when the alarm started screaming in her control room. She worked at the Advanced Deep Space Communication Facility in Puerto Rico, which had replaced the famous Arecibo telescope after it collapsed years earlier. Her job was to listen for signals from space, but she had never expected to actually find anything important. The signal was unlike anything Kate had ever seen. It was clearly artificial and incredibly complex. The transmission contained layers of information packed together in ways that seemed impossible with human technology. Her computer screens filled with numbers, symbols, and patterns that made her head spin. Dr. Ryan Phillips ran into the control room when he heard the alarms. Ryan was Kate's best friend and the facility's expert on languages and codes. He had spent years trying to figure out if aliens might use mathematics to communicate. Now he stared at the screens with his mouth hanging open. "Kate, this is real," Ryan said quietly. "This is actually happening." The two scientists worked for 3 days straight trying to understand the message. They called in help from universities around the world. Mathematicians, linguists, and computer experts all studied the transmission. Every test they ran proved the same thing. The signal came from somewhere far beyond Earth and contained information that humans could not have created. The message included a universal translator program that slowly taught their computers how to read galactic languages. When they finally decoded the main text, Kate and Ryan sat in stunned silence. It was an official welcome letter from something called the Galactic Council. Earth had apparently been accepted as a new member of an interstellar government that ruled thousands of worlds. Meanwhile, on the Council's central world, Chancellor Thekmora was having a typical busy morning. The massive alien looked like a cross between a tree and an octopus, with thick bark-like skin and dozens of flexible arms. He had been running the Council for over 200 years and was used to handling hundreds of decisions every day. His assistant handed him a data pad with the daily reports. New member integrations, trade disputes, territorial agreements, and scientific discoveries all needed his approval. Thekmora scanned through the list quickly. 847. New planets had been approved for integration across 12 different galactic sectors. This was normal for a busy week. He barely glanced at entry number 23 on the list. Sol 3, Earth, human species integration approved? It looked like every other routine approval. Vekmar stamped his approval on all the new memberships and moved on to more important matters. The Council governed over 50,000 worlds, so one more primitive planet did not seem worth his attention. Back on Earth, the news was spreading fast. Kate and Ryan had reported their discovery to NASA, and NASA had told the President. Within hours, every major government on Earth knew about the alien message. President Claire Matthews called an emergency meeting at the White House with her top advisors, Kevin Torres. The head of NASA stood in the Oval Office trying to explain something that seemed impossible. Madam President, we've confirmed the signal's authenticity with every test we have. The mathematics alone proves this came from a civilization far more advanced than ours. Either this is the greatest hoax in human history, or we just became members of an alien government. Dr. Lisa Carter, the president's science advisor, had spent the last 2 days reviewing all the data. She was a careful scientist who never jumped to conclusions, but the evidence was overwhelming. The transmission contained scientific information that we won't discover for decades, maybe centuries. Whoever sent this knows things about physics and mathematics that we're just beginning to understand. President Matthews rubbed her temples and tried to process the situation. She had dealt with wars, economic crises, and natural disasters during her time in office. But nothing had prepared her for first contact with aliens. What exactly are they asking us to do? That's the strange part, Kevin said. They're not asking us to do anything. They're congratulating us on becoming members and offering to help us integrate into galactic society. It's like they think we applied for membership and got accepted. The president looked around the room at her advisors. How is the public reacting? About as well as you'd expect, said her press secretary. Social media is going crazy. The stock market crashed this morning, but it's starting to recover. Religious leaders are split between calling it a miracle and calling it the end times. Half the country thinks it's fake news and the other half is demanding immediate action. General Henry Walsh, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, had been unusually quiet during the meeting. Finally, he spoke up. Madam President, we need to consider the possibility that this is some kind of trick or test. Maybe these aliens are checking to see how we react before they decide whether to help us or conquer us. Dr. Carter shook her head. General, the level of technology in this message is so far beyond ours that if they wanted to conquer us, they wouldn't need tricks. They could probably destroy our entire planet with weapons we can't even imagine. The fact that they're trying to communicate suggests they have peaceful intentions. President Matthews stood up and walked to the window overlooking the White House lawn. She could see protesters gathering outside the gates. Some carried signs welcoming aliens while others demanded that the government reject any contact with outer space. How long do we have to figure this out? The message says a representative will arrive within 1 Earth month to begin orientation procedures. Kate said through the video conference link from Puerto Rico. We have about 3 weeks to decide how to respond. The president turned back to face her advisors. Then we better get to work. Kevin, I want NASA to coordinate with every space agency on Earth. Lisa, get our best scientists working on understanding their technology. General, prepare our military but keep everything defensive. And someone needs to figure out how to explain this to the rest of the world without causing mass panic. As the meeting broke up, President Matthews stayed behind to think. In less than a week, humanity had gone from believing they were alone in the universe to learning they were now part of a galactic government. She had no idea what came next, but she knew that everything was about to change. Ambassador Quender floated in his specialized water tank aboard the Council transport ship as it approached the small blue planet called Earth. The Hydros diplomat had handled first contact situations dozens of times during his long career. He expected this assignment to be routine and boring like all the others. Primitive species always followed the same pattern. They were grateful, confused, and eager to learn from their advanced galactic neighbors. The briefing file on humans made them sound typical. They had recently developed chemical rockets and basic electronics. Their planet was divided into competing nations that fought small wars over resources and territory. Most importantly, they had no understanding of faster-than-light travel or galactic politics. Quender planned to spend a few months teaching them basic concepts and then hand them over to a junior administrator, but something was wrong from the moment his ship entered Earth's solar system. The humans were broadcasting radio signals that contained mathematical formulas from the Council's own welcome message. Somehow they had decoded galactic standard language in just 3 weeks. Most species took years to accomplish basic translation with Council help. Worse yet, the humans had modified their primitive satellites to broadcast responses using quantum communication principles. Quender checked his files 3 times to make sure he had the right planet. According to Council records, humans should not understand quantum mechanics for at least another 1,000 years. Dr. Kate Morrison stood in the newly constructed International First Contact Center in New York City. The building had been thrown together in record time as governments around the world struggled to prepare for humanity's first official meeting with aliens. Kate wore her best suit and tried to look calm, but her hands were shaking with excitement and fear. Dr. Ryan Phillips stood beside her checking translation equipment for the 100th time. Over the past 3 weeks, he had created computer programs that could translate between human languages and the alien communication system. His software was apparently so good that it worked better than some of the Council's own translation tools. Secretary General Maria Santos of the United Nations would officially represent humanity during the first meeting. She had spent weeks studying diplomatic protocols and alien cultural information that human scientists had extracted from the welcome message. Maria was nervous but determined to make a good impression on behalf of the entire human race. President Matthews watched from Washington through a secure video link. She had wanted to attend in person, but security experts worried about having too many world leaders in one place during first contact. Military commanders around the globe were on high alert even though the aliens had shown no signs of hostility. The alien ship landed in Central Park with surprisingly little fanfare. It looked like a giant soap bubble made of silver metal that seemed to bend light around its edges. No engines were visible, and it made no sound as it settled gently onto the grass. Thousands of people gathered behind security barriers to watch history being made. Ambassador Quender emerged from his ship in a mechanical suit filled with water. He looked like a cross between a dolphin and an octopus, with smooth blue skin and intelligent eyes that seemed to study everything around him. His voice came through speakers that translated his words into perfect English. "Greetings, people of Earth," Quender said formally. "I am Ambassador Quender of the Galactic Council. I have come to welcome your species into galactic civilization and begin your orientation process." Secretary General Santos stepped forward and bowed respectfully. "Welcome to Earth, Ambassador Quender. We are honored by your presence and grateful for this opportunity to join the galactic community." Quender expected the human leader to ask basic questions about the Council or request simple technological assistance. Instead, Santos handed him a thick document that made his eyes widen in surprise. "Ambassador, we have prepared a preliminary response to our membership invitation," Santos said. "We have some questions about Council procedures and would like to review certain policies before we fully integrate into galactic society." Quender opened the document with growing alarm. The humans had somehow obtained and analyzed the Council's basic legal framework. They were asking detailed questions about voting procedures, budget allocation, territorial rights, and judicial processes. No primitive species had ever requested this kind of information. The questions were not just detailed but uncomfortably specific. How were Council representatives chosen? Who audited Council finances? What happened when member species disagreed with Council decisions? Could new members review existing treaties before agreeing to them? The document contained 247 numbered questions that demonstrated a sophisticated understanding of government and law. Dr. Alex Chen had been working around the clock with teams of scientists around the world. They had reverse engineered portions of the alien technology from the welcome message and built devices that seemed impossible with human science. Alex had somehow created a quantum communication array using spare parts from old satellites and equipment, borrowed from particle accelerators. Ambassador, Dr. Chun said excitedly, we've made some improvements to your communication protocols. Our analysis suggests you could increase transmission efficiency by about 30% with some minor adjustments to your quantum entanglement matrix. Quender stared at the human scientist in disbelief. The communication system Dr. Chun was describing was more advanced than anything the Council used. Humans had not only understood alien technology, but had actually improved upon it in a matter of weeks. Captain Jake Sullivan joined the conversation via video link from the International Space Station. He had spent the past month coordinating with space agencies around the world to prepare humanity's official response to Council membership. Ambassador, we've drafted our preliminary acceptance of Council membership, Captain Sullivan said. However, we have some concerns about existing Council policies that we'd like to address before we agree to any binding commitments. The captain's words sent a chill through Quender's water-filled suit. In his experience, primitive species were always eager to accept any terms the Council offered. They never questioned existing policies or demanded changes to established procedures. Captain Sullivan continued reading from a prepared statement. We formally request access to all Council legislation passed in the last 1,000 years for review by our legal experts. We also request transparent budget reports and detailed explanations of how Council decisions are made and enforced. Finally, we would like to establish trade relationships with individual Council members before agreeing to any exclusive trade arrangements. Dr. Ryan Phillips added his own concerns. Our linguists have noticed some interesting patterns in Council communications. Your language structure suggests that most member species communicate through consensus and indirect suggestion. Humans tend to be more direct in our communication style. We want to make sure this cultural difference won't cause problems during Council meetings. Quender felt overwhelmed by the complexity of human responses. Every other species he had contacted simply accepted Council membership with gratitude and trust. Humans were treating galactic integration like a business negotiation, where every detail needed to be examined and approved. The situation became even more confusing when Dr. Kate Morrison presented her team's analysis of Council technology. Human scientists had not only decoded the alien communication system, but had identified several ways to improve its efficiency and security. They were offering to share their improvements with the Council as a gesture of good faith. We're particularly interested in your faster-than-light communication methods, Dr. Morrison said. Our preliminary analysis suggests you're using quantum entanglement in ways we hadn't considered. We've developed some theoretical improvements that might interest your scientists. Ambassador Quender realized that his standard orientation procedures were completely inadequate for dealing with humans. These beings were not a typical primitive species waiting to be guided into galactic civilization. They were active participants who expected to contribute to and improve upon existing systems. The formal ceremony continued for several more hours as human leaders presented their detailed analysis of Council membership. They had prepared economic projections, legal reviews, and scientific assessments that demonstrated a level of preparation that impressed and worried the alien diplomat. As the day ended, Quender retreated to his ship to prepare his first report to the Council. He stared at his communication device for a long time before beginning to write. How could he explain that humans had accomplished in 3 weeks what most species took decades to achieve? How could he tell the Council that these supposedly primitive beings were asking questions that challenged fundamental assumptions about galactic governance? Ambassador Quender began typing his report with growing concern. The Council needed to know that Earth was unlike any world they had ever encountered. Humans were not going to be passive members grateful for inclusion in galactic society. They were going to be active participants who questioned everything and demanded explanations for policies that had existed for thousands of years. 6 months after first contact, Chancellor Thekmer sat in his massive office on Council Central feeling the worst headache of his 200-year career. The daily reports from Earth filled 3 entire data tablets, and each one contained more problems than the last. What should have been a simple integration of a primitive species had become the biggest administrative crisis in Council history. The trouble started when humans actually read the Council's legal code. Most species accepted membership based on trust and general explanations from Council ambassadors. They followed guidance from experienced Council members and gradually learned the rules over decades of careful integration. Humans demanded to understand everything immediately, and they asked questions that no one had thought to ask before. President Matthews had appointed veteran diplomat Susan Clark as Earth's first official representative to the Galactic Council. Clark arrived at Council Central with a team of experts including Judge William Grant, economist Dr. Nicole Turner, and military advisor Colonel Peter Hayes. Their first action was requesting complete copies of all Council laws, regulations, and legal precedents dating back 50,000 years. The request sent Chief Archivist Morden into a panic. The ancient crystalline being had managed Council records for over 3,000 years, but no species had ever asked to review the complete legal code. Most Council laws were so old that they existed only in archived formats that required special equipment to access. Some regulations had been written in languages that were no longer spoken by any living beings. Morden spent sleepless weeks trying to compile documents that had not been accessed in millennia. The Council's legal system had grown through thousands of years of additions and amendments, but no one had ever organized it into a coherent structure. Ancient laws contradicted newer regulations, and some policies had been completely forgotten by everyone except the automated systems that still enforced them. Ambassador Clark's legal team discovered immediately that the Council's government structure made no logical sense. Laws had been written by different species, using different governmental concepts and then layered together without any attempt at consistency. Judge Grant spent days reading regulations that seemed to contradict each other on the same page. How do you resolve legal disputes when your own laws disagree with themselves? Judge Grant asked during his first Council meeting. The question caused an awkward silence because most Council members had never noticed the contradictions. Legal disputes were usually resolved through informal negotiation rather than strict interpretation of written law. Dr. Nicole Turner made an even more embarrassing discovery when she analyzed Council economic policies. The trade regulations that governed commerce between thousands of worlds were based on economic theories that human economists had abandoned centuries ago. Worse yet, the mathematical formulas used to calculate trade values contained basic errors that had been compounding for thousands of years. Your entire economic system is artificially inflating prices across 17 sectors, Dr. Turner announced during a Council Economic Committee meeting. These trade barriers are costing member species billions of credits annually while providing no actual benefits to anyone. The economists' analysis proved that Council trade policies were not just inefficient, but actively harmful to most member species. Small worlds were paying enormous fees to trade with their neighbors, while large commercial powers received unfair advantages that had never been formally approved. The system persisted only because no one had ever bothered to analyze it mathematically. Meanwhile, environmental scientist Dr. Rachel Green was conducting her own investigation of Council environmental policies. She expected to find advanced conservation methods that could help Earth protect its ecosystems. Instead, she discovered that Council environmental standards were actually lower than regulations already in place on Earth. Dr. Green published a detailed 500-page report comparing Council environmental policies to Earth's existing laws. The report demonstrated that humans had developed more effective pollution controls, wildlife protection measures, and resource conservation methods than the supposedly advanced galactic government. Her analysis went viral across 17 solar systems and inspired Three species to demand immediate reviews of environmental regulations affecting their worlds. The most disruptive human innovation came from entrepreneur Tony Brooks, who established the first human-run interstellar shipping company using modified Earth technology. Tony's approach was simple: fast delivery, low prices, and reliable service. His company used human organizational methods combined with reverse-engineered alien technology to create shipping routes that were 30% faster and 50% cheaper than established council carriers. Corporate representative Vashtel of the Merchant Guild demanded emergency trade restrictions on human businesses. The alien complained that humans were disrupting established commercial relationships that had existed for thousands of years. Traditional shipping companies could not compete with human efficiency, and several major galactic corporations were losing money for the first time in centuries. These humans do not understand the proper way to conduct interstellar commerce, Vashtel argued during an emergency council session. They ignore established protocols and relationships in favor of raw efficiency. This kind of disruption threatens the stability of our entire economic system. But other species were beginning to appreciate human business methods. The Outer Rim worlds, which had been paying excessive shipping costs for generations, embraced Tony Brooks' company enthusiastically. Three major trade alliances formally requested that human shipping methods be adopted as the new council standard. The final crisis came when human mathematician Dr. Eric Stone published his analysis of the council's ancient voting algorithm. The mathematical formula used to tally votes and make decisions had been considered sacred and unquestionable for over 3,000 years. Dr. Stone proved that the algorithm contained fundamental mathematical errors that had been producing incorrect results for millennia. Your voting system has been systematically favoring certain species while disadvantaging others for 3,000 years, Dr. Stone announced during a packed council session. Every major decision made using this algorithm needs to be recalculated to determine what the actual results should have been. The announcement caused chaos throughout council space. Species that had accepted defeat in ancient votes suddenly realized they might have actually won. Territorial boundaries, trade agreements, and resource allocations that had been considered final for thousands of years were now questionable. The mathematical proof was undeniable, but correcting 3,000 years of wrong decisions seemed impossible. Chancellor Thekmer called an emergency session to address what media outlets were calling the Earth crisis. The council chamber, designed for orderly consensus building among respectful species, erupted into arguments as representatives demanded explanations for problems they had never known existed. Ambassador Clark questioned every item on the meeting agenda and insisted on recorded minutes of all proceedings. She demanded explanations for budget allocations that had never been publicly disclosed and challenged the authority of committees that had operated in secret for centuries. The human diplomat treated council meetings like Earth legislative sessions where transparency and accountability were expected rather than optional. How can member species make informed decisions about policies when basic information is kept secret? Clark asked during one particularly heated debate. Democratic government requires informed participation from all citizens. The concept of democratic participation was foreign to most council species. Galactic government had always been managed by experienced leaders who made decisions on behalf of their populations. The idea that ordinary citizens should understand and influence government policies seemed dangerous and chaotic to many traditional council members. Dr. Eric Stone's mathematical discovery had revealed that the voting errors systematically favored the core world species while disadvantaging outer rim populations. The ancient and powerful Eternal Syndicate had been winning votes. They should have lost while smaller species had been denied rights and resources they had legitimately earned. The implications threatened to destabilize the entire galactic political structure. Species across the galaxy began demanding audits of decisions that affected their territories and rights. The Crystalline Collective formally requested recalculation of all trade agreements signed in the past millennium. The Hive Worlds Coalition demanded review of territorial boundaries that had been established through votes that might have been Wrong. Even traditionally loyal species began questioning whether their trust in council leadership had been misplaced. Chancellor Veckamer realized that the council faced an unprecedented crisis. The mathematical proof of voting errors could not be denied or ignored. Correcting 3,000 years of wrong decisions would require reviewing every major policy implemented since the algorithm's creation. The process could take decades and might completely restructure galactic civilization, but the alternative was even worse. If the Council refused to address the mathematical errors, news of Dr. Eric Stone's mathematical discovery spread through galactic communication networks faster than official Council announcements could control the damage. Species that had accepted Council decisions for thousands of years suddenly questioned every vote that had affected their worlds. What started as a human challenge to bureaucratic inefficiency had become a galaxy-wide crisis of confidence in the government that ruled 50,000 worlds. The Crystalline Collective was the first major alliance to demand a complete audit of past decisions. Their representative, a towering being made of living crystal that refracted light into rainbow patterns, stood before the Council and formally requested recalculation of every trade agreement signed in the past 3,000 years. The mathematical errors had apparently cost the collective billions of credits in unfair trade restrictions. The Hive Worlds Coalition followed with their own demands. These insect-like beings communicated through complex chemical signals and had always trusted Council decisions without question. Now they wanted territorial boundaries recalculated because the voting errors had apparently given away several of their star systems to species that should never have won those disputes. President Matthews found herself dealing with pressure from every direction as the galactic crisis reached Earth. Anti-alien protesters led by activist Gary Miller organized massive demonstrations, demanding immediate withdrawal from the Council. They carried signs reading "Earth First" and "No Alien Government," while chanting for humanity to reject all contact with outer space. "We never asked to join their broken government," Gary Miller shouted during a rally outside the White House. "These aliens have been lying and cheating each other for thousands of years. Why should we trust them with our future?" On the other side, pro-space advocates like Dr. Kate Morrison argued for deeper integration with galactic society. They pointed out that human analysis was helping fix problems that had existed for millennia and that isolation would prevent humanity from benefiting from advanced alien technology and knowledge. "We have a chance to help create a better galactic government," Dr. Morrison said during a televised debate. "Running away from problems won't solve anything. We should work with other species to build something better." Military leaders, including Admiral Helen Parker, prepared contingency plans for potential conflict while hoping it would never be necessary. The Admiral spent sleepless nights studying reports about alien military capabilities and wondering if humanity could defend itself if the Council decided to expel Earth by force. "We're dealing with civilizations that have been traveling between stars for thousands of years," Admiral Parker warned during a classified briefing. "If this situation turns violent, we need to be realistic about our chances. Our best defense is probably to avoid making enemies in the first place." Ambassador Susan Clark worked frantically to prevent exactly that outcome. She spent her days in diplomatic meetings trying to build alliances with moderate council members who wanted reform rather than revolution. Clark knew that Earth's survival might depend on finding species willing to support gradual change instead of violent upheaval. The situation became more complicated when Dr. Eric Stone's mathematical analysis revealed the full extent of the voting errors. The algorithm had not just made random mistakes but had systematically favored certain species while disadvantaging others. The ancient and powerful Eternal Syndicate had been winning votes they should have lost for over 3,000 years. The Outer Rim species, led by charismatic speaker Zenkar, formed a new political alliance demanding immediate reparations for centuries of unfair treatment. Zenkar was a tall, thin being with silver skin and multiple arms who had become famous for passionate speeches about justice and equality. His alliance included dozens of species that had been systematically cheated by the flawed voting system. For 3,000 years, we have been told that democracy decided against us. Zenkar declared during a massive rally broadcast across 40 star systems. Now we learn that mathematics decided for us, but corruption decided against us. We demand justice for every stolen vote and every unfair decision. The core worlds, dominated by the Eternal Syndicate, refused to acknowledge any errors or accept responsibility for benefits they had gained through flawed calculations. These ancient and wealthy species argued that changing past decisions would destabilize galactic civilization and harm innocent populations, who had built their lives around existing agreements. Meanwhile, human innovation continued disrupting established galactic systems in unexpected ways. Dr. Nicole Turner's economic analysis had inspired the creation of free trade zones that allowed species to bypass traditional council commercial restrictions. Her proposed reforms attracted immediate support from 43 species, who wanted to reduce trade costs and increase economic efficiency. Engineering teams led by Dr. Lisa Carter developed manufacturing techniques that could produce council standard goods at 1/10 the traditional cost. Their factories used human organizational methods combined with alien technology to create products that were both cheaper and higher quality than anything available through established suppliers. The manufacturing revolution threatened powerful commercial interests throughout the galaxy. Traditional producers could not compete with human efficiency, and several major corporations faced bankruptcy for the first time in their 1,000-year histories. Corporate leaders demanded government protection from unfair human competition, but smaller species embraced human business methods enthusiastically. The Verdani plant-based civilizations had been paying excessive prices for manufactured goods for centuries. Human factories offered them the same products at prices they could actually afford. Similar benefits attracted support from dozens of other species that had been excluded from galactic commerce by high costs. The crisis reached a breaking point when humans organized the first-ever Galactic Transparency March on Council Central. Over 200,000 beings from 37 different species gathered in the capital to demand open government, public budget reports, and accountability from Council leadership. The march was completely peaceful but unprecedented in Council history. No one had ever organized a multi-species protest movement before. Different alien cultures had always dealt with their governments separately through traditional diplomatic channels. The idea of species working together to demand political change was revolutionary. Dr. Kate Morrison spoke to the massive crowd using translation devices that broadcast her words in hundreds of different languages. Government should serve the people, not the other way around, she said, as beings from across the galaxy listened in amazement. When leaders make decisions in secret and refuse to explain their actions, they lose the right to govern. The march included representatives from species that had been enemies for centuries but were now united in demanding honest government. Traditional military rivals stood side by side carrying signs demanding the same reforms. The sight of ancient enemies cooperating peacefully shocked Council observers who had never seen anything like it. Chancellor Thekmor watched the march from his office window and realized that his government faced an existential crisis. The peaceful protest demonstrated that opposition to Council leadership was spreading far beyond Earth. Humans had somehow inspired species across the galaxy to demand changes that challenged the fundamental structure of galactic civilization. The situation became even worse when Chief Administrator Nexrel made a devastating discovery while reviewing Earth's integration files. The original paperwork showed clearly that Earth's membership had been the result of a filing error by a tired intern. Legally, humans had never qualified for Council membership, and their integration had been completely invalid from the beginning, but removing Earth's membership would require a complex legal process that could take decades to complete. Worse yet, hundreds of species had already established trade relationships, scientific partnerships, and diplomatic agreements with humanity. Canceling Earth's membership might invalidate thousands of contracts and destabilize existing treaties. The legal complications were enormous, but the political consequences were even worse. Any attempt to expel Earth would be seen as punishment for exposing Council corruption. Species that supported human reforms would view expulsion as proof that the Council could not tolerate honest criticism. The resulting backlash might trigger the complete collapse of galactic government. Chancellor Thekmer called an emergency meeting of the Council's inner leadership to discuss their impossible situation. They could not legally justify Earth's membership, but they could not afford to remove it. They could not ignore the mathematical proof of voting errors, but they could not afford to correct 3,000 years of wrong decisions. The Chancellor stared at reports from across the galaxy showing growing support for human-inspired reforms. Traditional allies were demanding explanations for decisions they had previously accepted without question. Ancient enemies were cooperating to demand common changes. The mathematical proof of systemic errors had destroyed the Council's credibility. With populations that had trusted galactic government for millennia, President Matthews sat in the White House Situation Room surrounded by her most trusted advisors as reports flooded in from across the galaxy. 3 different Council factions were demanding completely opposite responses to the crisis that Earth had accidentally created. The traditionalists wanted humanity expelled immediately to restore order. The reformers wanted humans to lead a complete restructuring of galactic government. The isolationists wanted to dissolve the Council entirely and return to independent planetary rule. Secretary of State Jonathan Baker spread star charts across the conference table showing military movements throughout Council space. Madam President, we're looking at the potential for interstellar civil war. If we choose the wrong side or make the wrong move, humanity could find itself at the center of a conflict involving thousands of worlds. Dr. Kate Morrison joined the meeting via a secure video link from the International Space Station, where she had been working with alien scientists on emergency solutions to the crisis. The math is clear, she said. The Council's problems existed long before we arrived. We just happened to be the ones who noticed them first. The President rubbed her temples as she studied intelligence reports about fleet movements and diplomatic communications across the galaxy. Ancient alliances were breaking apart while new coalitions formed around support for or opposition to human-inspired reforms. Species that had been allies for millennia were choosing different sides based on whether they had benefited from or been harmed by the flawed voting system. General Henry Walsh provided the military assessment that everyone feared. If this turns into shooting war, we're completely outmatched. Some of these species have been fighting each other with advanced weapons for thousands of years. Our best strategy is to avoid taking sides and hope the conflict doesn't reach Earth. But Dr. Morrison had a different idea. During her months working with Council scientists, she had learned that most alien species were better at maintaining existing systems than creating new ones. Humans excelled at analyzing problems and developing innovative solutions. Instead of choosing between the 3 factions, she proposed something unprecedented. What if we don't pick a side? Dr. Morrison suggested. What if we offer to help all 3 factions by creating something completely new that addresses everyone's concerns? President Matthews leaned forward with interest. What did you have in mind? Dr. Morrison explained her concept for a galactic reset protocol that would systematically review and update all Council systems using human analytical methods combined with alien technological capabilities. Instead of trying to fix 3,000 years of wrong decisions, they would create entirely new systems designed to be fair, efficient, and transparent from the beginning. The proposal appealed to different factions for different reasons. Traditionalists saw it as a way to strengthen existing institutions rather than destroying them. Reformers viewed it as the comprehensive modernization they had been demanding. Even isolationists appreciated the systematic approach that could create better government without the chaos of complete dissolution. Ambassador Susan Clark presented the Reset Protocol proposal during an emergency session of the full Galactic Council. The chamber was packed with representatives from hundreds of species, while billions more watched through live broadcasts across the galaxy. The tension was so thick that security forces from 12 different species stood ready to prevent violence. We propose a 6-month trial period, Clark announced to the hushed assembly. Human analytical teams will work with alien experts from every major species to review and redesign council systems. If the results are satisfactory, we implement the new systems permanently. If not, we return to previous methods with no permanent changes. Chancellor Thekmer had initially opposed the proposal because it challenged his authority as council leader. But private conversations with trusted advisors convinced him that the reset protocol offered the only peaceful solution to a crisis that threatened to destroy galactic civilization. The alternative was civil war that could last for centuries and devastate thousands of worlds. The vote on the reset protocol was the first decision made using Dr. Eric Stone's corrected mathematical algorithms. For the first time in 3,000 years, every species could be confident that their votes were counted accurately. The proposal passed by an overwhelming margin, as even traditional opponents admitted that systematic reform was better than chaos and conflict. The reset protocol teams combined human curiosity and analytical skills with alien expertise and technological capabilities in ways that produced results nobody had expected. Dr. Stone worked with crystalline mathematicians to develop new voting algorithms that were not only accurate but completely transparent so that any species could verify the results independently. Dr. Nicole Turner collaborated with Hydro's economists and gas giant dwelling Aryans to design trade systems that reduced costs while increasing fairness and efficiency. The new economic framework eliminated artificial barriers that had inflated prices for millennia, while creating opportunities for species that had been excluded from galactic commerce. Environmental teams, led by Dr. Rachel Green, partnered with the plant-based Verdani species and silicon-based rock dwellers to create comprehensive ecological protection standards. The new environmental policies were stricter than anything in Council history, but also more practical because they were designed by beings who actually understood different types of planetary ecosystems. The results exceeded everyone's most optimistic expectations. The new systems were not only more efficient and fair than anything in Council history, but also easier to understand and operate. Trade volume increased by 300% within the first month. Environmental restoration projects began in 47 star systems. The corrected voting algorithms revealed that 17 species were owed massive territorial and resource reparations, which were peacefully negotiated rather than fought over. Human innovation continued, transforming galactic society, but now with alien partnership rather than disruption. Captain Jake Sullivan led the first joint human-alien deep space exploration mission using ships that combined Earth engineering with advanced alien technology. The hybrid vessels were faster and more efficient than anything either species could build alone. Dr. Ryan Phillips established the Galactic University, which combined Earth educational methods with alien knowledge systems. Students from dozens of species learned together using teaching techniques that had never been tried before. The university became so popular that applications came from across the galaxy. Tony Brooks expanded his shipping company into a full logistics network that connected thousands of worlds, using human organizational methods and alien transportation technology. His success inspired hundreds of other joint ventures between human and alien entrepreneurs. The transformation was not without challenges. Some traditional council members resented losing privileges they had enjoyed for millennia. Several commercial cartels tried to sabotage human businesses that threatened their monopolies. But the benefits of the new systems were so obvious that opposition gradually faded as more species experienced improved living conditions. Ambassador Clark became the first human chancellor pro tem when Thekmer stepped down to serve as senior advisor. Her election was unanimous, as even former opponents admitted that human leadership had produced the most positive changes in galactic government history. Clark's first official act was establishing the Transparency Council, which ensured that all government decisions would be made in public with full documentation. The final ceremony celebrating the Council's successful transformation took place 1 year after Dr. Eric Stone had first discovered the mathematical errors. Representatives from over 1,000 species gathered to officially adopt the new governmental systems and celebrate the peaceful resolution of what could have been a devastating galactic war. President Matthews addressed the assembly on behalf of humanity. "We never intended to change galactic civilization," she said as translation devices carried her words to billions of beings across the galaxy. "We just wanted to understand how things worked." But sometimes asking simple questions leads to discovering that things could work much better. Chancellor Thekmar, now serving as senior advisor, officially welcomed Earth to the reformed Galactic Council. "We have learned that questioning authority is not disrespectful," he said. "It is essential for good government. The humans have taught us that the most dangerous phrase in any language is, 'This is how we have always done things.'" The story concluded with Dr. Kate Morrison back at her research facility, now expanded into a joint human-alien scientific complex where beings from dozens of species work together on projects that none could accomplish alone. She was reviewing a message from the newly discovered Spiral Arm Confederation, which had requested Earth's help with their own governmental challenges. Morrison smiled as she realized that humanity's greatest strength was not their technology or their determination, but their stubborn refusal to accept that existing systems could not be improved. The galaxy would never be the same because humans had accidentally proven that asking questions and demanding better solutions could change civilization itself.